Hello and welcome back to the third and final committee chair engagement session for today. So we've already heard from Dieter and Matt on their respective committees, and we'll now have an opportunity to hear from Peter Braumüller, chair of the Implementation and Assessment Committee. He will share with us the important work of the IAC that it's been conducting this year and provide an insight into what lies ahead. And just to remind everyone about the structure, we'll start with a 10-minute presentation, followed by a Q&A session with all of you, in which you can either send questions in the chat function or message us and let us know that you would like to take the floor. So without any further ado, I hand the floor to Peter. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. It's my pleasure to present to you an update on the work going on in the IAC. Let me start with an update on our implementation assessment. The member assessment program, the so-called MAP, is an in-depth assessment of a member's implementation of the ICPs, similar to the IMF World Bank's Financial Sector Assessment Program, the FSAP. The MAP for the Sultanate of Oman concluded with the final report's publication on 27th of June. And meanwhile, the assessment of Costa Rica is underway, with the final report expected by mid-2026. We have also launched a peer review process, PRP, on ICP 13, which is on reinsurance and other forms of risk transfer, open to all IAS members. And a report with aggregate results and examples of supervisory practices will be published in Q1 next year. We are committed to implementation assessments in major insurance markets to ensure alignment with our standards. Last month, EXCO approved the individual reports of the 6 additional jurisdictions covered by the second phase of targeted jurisdictional assessments, the so-called TGAs on the implementation of the holistic framework supervisory material, namely for Australia, Bermuda, Italy, Singapore, South Africa, and Spain. An aggregate report with overarching trends and insights across participating jurisdictions will be prepared for publication. And the IAS will also monitor the progress being made in the other 10 jurisdictions that already participated in the first TGA tranche in addressing the identified gaps. And the implementation status of the holistic framework for all the 16 10+6 jurisdictions will be reported to the FSB later this year, followed by public communication. Let me turn to the ICS implementation. I think we have already heard something about that in the previous sessions. The IAS has established the following timeline for the ICS implementation. For 2025, the IAS is currently developing a detailed methodology for assessing ICS implementation, and this methodology will specify the level of granularity required and define the qualitative and quantitative analysis. We are also developing a self-assessment questionnaire to be used by IAS jurisdictions next year. The methodology and questionnaire will be based on high-level principles that are publicly available on the IAS website and were referred to in the previous sessions. In 2026 then, using the self-assessment questionnaire, the jurisdictions will conduct a baseline self-assessment to evaluate their progress in implementing the ICS. This will highlight readiness levels and areas needing additional support. And then from 2027 onwards, the IAS will aim to conduct detailed jurisdictional assessments of the ICS implementation. As part of this process, and this was also referred to in one of the previous questions already, the final aggregation method developed by the US as its implementation for the ICS will also be assessed. And the assessment of the AAM will be subject to the same timing as ICS implementation assessments in other jurisdictions, and to a consistent methodology, of course, including both qualitative and quantitative analysis, whilst at the same time focusing on the AM specificities. Let me turn to the work of the forums. The IAIS has established 6 forums to provide members with an effective platform for peer-to-peer exchanges on various supervisory topics. These forums also regularly receive updates from stakeholders. In addition to the Financial Crime Forum, the Retirement Income and Pension Forum, and the Supervisory Forum, I would like today to underline developments in 3 other forums. In particular, first, on the 2nd of July, the application paper on the supervision of AI, just referred to in the previous session, developed by the FinTech Forum, was published. And this paper reinforces the importance of existing ICPs and promotes appropriate and globally consistent oversight of AI in the insurance sector. I encourage participation, as was already mentioned, in our public webinar that is scheduled for the 17th of July. Second, the Financial Inclusion Forum focuses on the role of inclusive insurance markets in promoting financial well-being and societal resilience. The fifth is currently working on finalizing the draft of the application paper on inclusive insurance that reflects changes in the regulatory landscape since its original publication back in 2012. This is being developed in close collaboration with CIGAP within the World Bank Group, with a public consultation planned for later this year. And last but not least, the Risk-Based Solvency Implementation Forum provides guidance to insurance supervisors from EMD jurisdictions on implementing RBS regimes. Last month, we published a guidance paper on how to implement RBS regimes, and particularly in EMDE markets, which has been very well received by EMDE members. Let me turn to protection gaps. The rising frequency and severity of natural catastrophe events is impacting the availability and affordability of insurance coverage, which leads to protection gaps. The IAIS is actively supporting work to address these gaps, including helping to drive a collaborative approach among stakeholders. Most recently, the IAIS contributed to the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group under South Africa's G20 presidency. This work has been undertaken jointly with the World Bank and will be published soon. I also invite you to join the panel session on NatCat protection gaps tomorrow. The G20 input paper discusses multi-party solutions for NatCat insurance protection gap, offering possible actions that can be taken by various stakeholders, stressing the importance of collaboration among governments, supervisors, and all other stakeholders. Building on the paper, the IAIS plans to develop a practical resource to assist policymakers and supervisors in addressing NatCat protection gaps. Lastly, let me turn to supervisory capacity building. I would like first to thank our implementation partners, the HYI, the FSI, the IAA, and Toronto Centre, for their critical role in supporting our work. For the second half of the year, we are working with our implementation partners to deliver training programs, including the FSI IAIS Regulatory and Supervisory Online Program, known as the First One, and policy implementation meeting on the IFRS. We continue working with the IMF to respond to the growing demand for IFRS 17 related training. Following HYI's transition to CIGAP earlier this month, programs such as the Inclusive Insurance Training, Actuarial Skills Program, and the e-learning platform We will continue by partners such as the Toronto Center, the International Actuarial Association, and the Frankfurt School of Management and Finance to strengthen our support to the supervisory community. In closing, the IAIS remains committed to fostering strong implementation of global insurance standards, advancing supervisory capacity and addressing critical challenges. Through collaboration, peer exchange, and targeted initiatives, we continue to support our members in navigating a rapidly evolving insurance landscape. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that comprehensive update, and thank you also for your leadership on these topics, which has really been taking things from strength to strength, as well as the leadership of Connor Donaldson in the Secretariat Management team, who couldn't be with us today. Great, we'll now open the floor to questions, and let me go straight to a first question, which is from Nick Dexter from the International Actuarial Association. Nick cannot join us today live, but he has shared his question in advance, which I'll read out on his behalf. So to Peter, we note that the IAIS is continuing to develop firstly technical notes on ICS implementation, which was covered a bit by Matt, but secondly also practical aspects of implementing risk-based solvency regimes, building off the guidance on this topic that was published a couple of weeks ago. Are there any aspects of this work where input from the IAA would be helpful?
Good question. Let me start with just telling you, not surprisingly, that standard setting work is followed by standard implementation work and by standard implementation assessment work. So now the ICS is adopted and the IAIS is working on its proper implementation. And the technical notes, which you reference, provide examples and explanations that were used during the field testing and monitoring period, annual data collection exercises to help volunteer groups understand the technical specifications. When we adopted the ICS, the level 1 and level 2 texts contained only the standard. Accordingly, providing these examples should be helpful in supporting implementation. We have reviewed them and are now publishing them in these so-called technical notes. So that should bridge the way from a standard setting and having standards into the implementation. And also beyond this, we are currently working on several important ICS-related supervisory and supporting material that will be subject to public consultation either this year or in 2026. And stakeholders' input, including the IAA, on those items will really be very useful. Firstly, we are developing new COM-frame standards for the ICS within the ICPs on supervisory reporting and public disclosure. So this means ICP 9 and 20. And the public disclosure standards will be a subset of the standards for supervisory requirements in line with their different objectives. Also, we are working on an application paper on availability of capital whose objectives is to share experiences on how group-wide supervisors address the availability of capital issues in their group supervision, particularly when applying a consolidated group standard such as the ICS. This paper is also expected to provide examples of how supervisors address cases of double or multiple capital gearing in the absence of fully consolidated group standards, where intergroup holdings of regulatory capital may overstate the overall group capital position. Developing actuarial capacity is a key priority identified by our members for a successful implementation of a risk-based solvency regime. And this need is particularly pronounced in emerging market and developing economies, where actuarial expertise is often more than limited. The partnership agreement between the IAA and the IAIS has provided a strong foundation for leveraging actuarial expertise to support supervisors in this critical area. As we continue to deepen our focus on implementation, we look forward to collaborating further with the IAA to enhance our support to supervisors. And building on the existing program, we aim to address key areas where supervisors have expressed the need for additional assistance. This includes the implementation of ORSA, tackling challenges related to IFRS 17 in the context of risk-based solvency framework, and developing key performance indicators. We are looking forward to engage with the IA on these topics through our risk-based solvency implementation forum over the next few months.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. And we have a next question, which is from Dennis Noortuk of the Geneva Association. And perhaps whilst we tee up Dennis, just to say from my side as well, a very big thank you also to our partners at the IMF, who were co-drafters of that guidance on implementing risk-based solvency regimes. And if you haven't seen it, I think it's an incredibly helpful handbook, which really talks about how to calibrate that risk-based solvency regime based on a number of factors, but which includes the sort of level of technical expertise within the supervisor, within the industry, and really helps to identify those areas where we do need to work on additional capacity building. Do we have Dennis with us?
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Peter, for the comprehensive presentation. And I just want to follow up on one of the points you mentioned on protection gaps. So insurance fundamentally strengthens society's resilience by managing, pooling, and diversifying risk. And to fulfill this purpose, especially for vulnerable communities, insurers need to offer or need to be able to offer inclusive products whose design, distribution, and servicing meet consumers' or customers' need, and therefore help to close protection gaps. You already briefly mentioned the protection gaps, not least in relation to NatCat and the IAIS call for action paper, which I think is from late 2023. Now, following up on that, what specific activities has the IAIS planned to support this initiative and to support this objective? And what work is the IAIS doing or planning in relation more specifically to the growing protection gaps in the life and retirement sector, where I believe one of the biggest and largest protection gaps loom? So thank you very much for shedding some light on that.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for the question. Let me start with where this all finds its basis. It is our IAIS 2025-2029 strategic plan. And in this plan, the IAS identified the societal role of insurance in supporting resilience. I think a very key element and a major step forward compared to previous strategic approaches. This theme allows us to look holistically at issues that contribute to protection gaps, considering all the factors around, such as the impact of digital innovation, climate change, aging populations. So this is a very, very broad subject. Currently, the NatCat protection gaps remain a priority for the IAS and our members, as set out in our 25-26 roadmap. And in developing our next roadmap for 26-27, the IAS will consider whether to undertake further work on other protection gaps, not to forget them at the same time. The IASIS, and I mentioned briefly in my presentation, the Retirement Income and Pension Forum has considered different elements of retirement protection gaps in recent meetings. It looks at both trends, such as longevity and also product developments. For instance, it has considered the adequacy of retirement income, pensions and women, access to advice, long-term care insurance, and the impact of cost of living pressures on pension savings. The Retirement Income and Pension Forum has benefited greatly from the presentations we have received from the Geneva Association and other trade associations and insurers. So you see it's already getting more intense and more broader also on the other type of gaps around. And the intention of the forum is to continue to function as a forum which provides a platform for sharing information and discuss supervisory practices and challenges on this issue, and therefore it does not undertake policy work. We also will leverage on the engagement with the OECD and the IOPS, the International Organization of Pension Supervisors, to ensure we are considering these issues holistically across the supervisory and regulatory community. So a lot going on, but certainly you will see much more in our next roadmap for 2026 and 2027. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Let's move straight to the next question, which is from Mary Frances Munro. Mary Frances isn't with us live, but I'll read out her question, which is around the implementation assessment issues. Specifically, what are the key and new areas of macroprudential focus in the second round of targeted jurisdictional assessments of the implementation of the holistic framework supervisory material? Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to make clear again that the 2024-25 Holistic Framework Implementation Assessment builds on the 21-22 targeted jurisdictional assessments and includes, in addition to the 10 already covered then, 6 other jurisdictions. As I mentioned, I think Australia, Bermuda, Italy, Singapore, South Africa, and Spain. And this second phase evaluates their progress in implementing supervisory measures under the holistic framework to address systemic risk in the insurance sector. And the assessment covers, in principle, the same areas and follows the same approach as in the first assessment, done a few years ago, but just for different jurisdictions. And why did we do this? Because we believe it's also important to ensure consistency in our assessments across the first and the second TGAs. Because if they are then reported together, it should be on an equal basis, on a comparable and consistent basis. And as a reminder, what these objectives of the TGA were: first, to assess the observance of the material aspects of the HF supervisory material in the participating jurisdiction and identify any gaps or challenges in the implementation process, similar to the previous TGA. And secondly, to contribute to IAIS reporting to the Financial Stability Board on the implementation of the HF and to help inform the FSB's review in 2025 of its endorsement of the HF. So it's a critical phase for us still to continue to prove that the holistic framework is working well in practice and delivering what we want it to deliver. So this is a major part that we can report on, I think, a very broad and deep assessment of 16 jurisdictions altogether. And these assessments cover key macroprudential standards under ICP 24, including data collection and analysis, assessment of the systemic importance of insurers and the sector, supervisory requirements for macroprudential purposes, and finally also transparency. The TGAs analyzed how supervisors apply enhanced frameworks using qualitative and quantitative criteria such as size, interconnectedness, and substitutability to tailor supervisory measures to insurers' systemic footprints. Jurisdictions are using a variety of macroprudential tools such as stress testing, scenario analysis, and sector-wide assessments. Another key focus was the identification of and the additional requirements for the International Active Insurance Group, our so-called IAIGs. And this involved the application of CAMFRAME standards, which are tailored to their global operations. And these standards include measures such as enhanced liquidity risk management. Finally, assessments evaluated jurisdictions' progress in strengthening recovery and resolution frameworks to improve preparedness for managing insurers' distress. And the IAIS will publish the TGA report on the implementation of the HF supervisory material in the first quarter of next year, providing an overview of progress best practices and areas for improvement. Back to you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you, Peter. I think we have time for one last question, which is from Anthony Konung from CGAP, heading up now the Access to Insurance Initiative activities. And Anthony, I think we can move live to you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you all for allowing me to engage. I actually wanted to ask you, Peter, what your expectations are of the implementation of the Cape Town Declaration of Inclusive Insurance, the declaration that was announced at the December IAIS annual meeting, and which we at CGAP will look very much forward to activating with all the members of the IAIS. So I'd really like to hear what your expectations are of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Antonique, and welcome. And thank you for taking over, CGAP taking over these, the further development of the Cape Town Declaration. In short words, the Cape Town Declaration for me is an instrument that should give further momentum to the process of leading to more inclusiveness in the insurance sector, to leading to more financial health, and addressing the needs of vulnerable people. And in a way that is encouraging those who want to do something to find a platform for doing that, to find a framework for doing that, to find support for doing that, but at the same time also to express their commitments. So that commitment is not just to do something, but really to have concrete commitments and make progress. So my overall expectation would be that through the Cape Town Declaration, we will see a further spread, a visible and tangible further spread of inclusive insurance on a global basis.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. And maybe just to add, those of you who weren't there in Cape Town at the inaugural meeting of the on the Cape Town Declaration on Inclusive Insurance, I think it was a very good start because we had representatives from 26 jurisdictions representing a population of more than 3 billion people at that meeting, and really putting their hands up to take a very active role in promoting inclusive insurance in their markets. So thank you to CGAP as well for taking that forward. So that brings us to the end of today, and thank you very much, Peter, for your presentation and insightful answers, but also to everyone joining today's session, for watching, providing us with your great questions. We're approaching the end of the IAC session for today, and in fact the end of the second day of the global seminar. So on behalf of Dieter, Matt and Peter, as well as Roman, Hannah and myself, thank you very much for joining us for some important and engaging discussions. We hope you found today's sessions useful, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.